A ratio is simply a comparison of two numbers by division. Those two numbers do not need to have the same units. All you're simply doing is comparing them. And so there are three ways to write ratios. Let's take an example. Let's say we have 2 girls and 3 boys. The three ways we can write that ratio is simply using the word 2. So we have 2 girls to 3 boys, and so we'd say the ratio is 2 to 3. We could also use a semicolon. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a colon. And then we can use it as a division just like the definition says. But you need to notice that the 2 always came first. Because it was written girls to boys, we needed to put the amount of girls first or on top. Let's do some more of these together, and we'll write them all 3 ways just to get practice. So if I looked, according to this picture, to the ratios of Lifesavers to Jolly Ranchers, and I was asked to compare the number of red Lifesavers to the number of red Jolly Ranchers, well, in this picture I can see 2 red Lifesavers, and then Jolly Rancher, it seems to be just 1. This one looks a little more pink, so I'm going to say the cherry is just 1. So the ratio there is 2 to 1. Again, you could have written it with the word 2 in it, or as a fraction. Looking at green Lifesavers to purple Jolly Ranchers, I can see 1, 2 green Lifesavers, and I can see 1 purple Jolly Rancher. Well, that's not very fun, but it's the same ratio, so we could write it again. Let's look at the total number of Lifesavers to the total number of Jolly Ranchers. You go ahead and write the ratio. I looked real hard and I was counting all these little sneaky ones in there. Even if you didn't, hopefully you wrote them this way. Now, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers using division. We are going to talk about a rate. A rate is different in that it's a comparison or a ratio of two measurements that have different units, like miles and hours or dollars and ounces. It's nice to remember that rates are usually expressed as a per unit form. So something per something. Now a unit rate is more specific. That's a rate where your denominator is 1. Let's look at an example of what we mean by a unit rate. It says that we're supposed to write the space station's average rate. It goes 15 miles per 3 seconds, and that's the rate. But as a unit rate, we would simply take the numbers and divide them. So just take your 15 divided by 3 and you get 5 miles per second. Now we talk this way all the time in real life, so it's nothing really new. Again, this denominator, if we wrote it, would have been 1, but we don't usually write it. It's just to be understood that you take your numbers and divide them to get a denominator of 1. And finally, we have our last vocabulary of the video, and that is the word proportion. A proportion is an equation, so it will have an equal sign, and it says that two rates are equal to each other. For example, in our original problem with girls to boys, our ratio was we had 2 girls to 3 boys. Well, a proportion could be made if suddenly you had 6 boys. And how many girls would you have? 4. So 2 to 3 is equivalent to 4 to 6. Now you just can't make up your own ratio if you want to. You have to actually make sure they're truly equal to each other. And there's a couple ways to do this. The first way is to take that 2 and divide it by 3. And you see on your calculator that you get 0.6 repeating. I'll just do this. Oops. If you took 4 and divided it by 6, you get, again, 0.6 repeating. I'm going to erase those. They're so bad. Okay, so those two fractions are truly equal to each other. There's another way to determine if you truly have a proportion in front of you, and that is to take the products of the diagonals. 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 4 is also 12. So that tells you you truly have a proportion, and you can use that to check it. You can also solve some proportions that are easy to do in your head. So if I had 4 over 5 of something, and I knew that I had 20 down here of something else, you could probably use mental math to figure out how many belong in the numerator here. So we could say we had 4 chocolate chip cookies and 5 peanut butter cookies. Well, the ratio should hold if you have 20 peanut butter cookies. How many chocolate chip would you have? And some people can see the mental math here that in order to get from 5 to 20, you multiplied by 4. And so if you do that to the numerator as well, you're going to get your answer of 16. So 16 chocolate chip cookies is what you should have if you found out you had 20 of the peanut butter. Let me give you one to figure out quick. If I had 4 out of 5 again, but I knew I had 8 of something else, what number would go in the box to make that truly a proportion? Hopefully you said 10. But you could check your answer, remember, by taking those diagonals and multiplying them. There's a 40, and there's a 40 as well. And this will be an important concept in our next video on using proportions to solve for variables that we don't know.
Drop it where you are. Drop it where you are. Drop it.